We have made it. We made it. Paul, you and I, our headlines are very similar. Mine says our long national nightmare is over. Yours says, oh, sweet baby Jesus, it's finally here. We did it, boys. We did it.
Every summer, man. Every summer it seems like a struggle now. It's like, you get excited. It's like, okay, cool. School year's over. Get to do some fun stuff. Take some trips, go to the beach, whatever. And then by I don't know, mid-July, I'm slumming. I'm like, man, get these kids back in a goddamn school bus. Please let football come back. I'm so excited. So nice.
Every offseason gets longer. It's really crazy. I think maybe some of that is because, if your kids aren't little anymore, the time goes slower because you're not frantically, doing stuff with them. But it does seem like it has been 7 months since the season ended, so it's quite a while.
That's crazy. It really doesn't feel like Nashville was all that long ago.
Nashville, yes. And Paul, Jeff and I, we did a show about, what was it? How many weeks ago was that now? 3-4 weeks? A month ago?
Yeah, 3 weeks, right? With I don't even really want to talk about that night.
Oh, yeah, with Loxley. That's right. You missed the Loxley show. But we were talking about how we hadn't seen each other since Nashville, but we haven't even done a show with you since when? When is the last time
It's been a minute.
May?
It's been a minute. Which was part of the reason I got screwed out of the Locks interview, because I, rehook all my stuff up to my computer, and the webcam just knocked out the entire audio video system, and I had to go and re-download drivers and do all this weirdo tech stuff to get it to work. And
yeah,
it's back, but it
was behind the scenes throwing his laptop at the wall
I was so mad. Yeah, bro, you remember I was texting you I was like, F this, I can't make it, it's stupid, whatever.
Yeah.
It was a good interview, though.
Yes, it was a great interview. I had a bunch more questions for him, but the guy is very selfish with his time, and we had to let him go. So,
Larry, you were owning the entire summer, man. That Fridge series was great. If you haven't seen it yet, you really should, because it's just, especially just starting to think about football again and the good things about it. Just hearing Ralph telling stories and shooting the shit with Larry is really just a good time. Whether you agree with his rankings on this player or that player, whatever, it doesn't really matter. That's not the point.
Yeah, the stories made it.
Yeah, that's what I said. I had the idea to do the rankings, which I thought were cool and are cool. That's a cool part of it, but it ended up becoming more of just a vehicle for Ralph to just go off, and that ended up being the thing. And
got to get Gary. I keep forgetting to reach out.
Do the same thing with Gary.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, he would. I think he'd be jazzed about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you guys haven't seen it, there's a 5-part series. It's on the YouTube channel. You can go check it out. 10 position groups, 2 position groups per episode. And Ralph, just amazing stories. And I keep telling everyone the last story he told on the last episode is the best one. It is absolutely insane. But yeah, the whole thing is crazy. And it would be awesome to get Gary too. You think you get him, right? He's been on the show.
50-50 at worst. I think he'd do it. He likes talking now, he likes nostalgia.
He seems very, very freed from his what he thought was his bonds.
You can only play golf so much. You got to find something else to do, right?
I guess.
He's living the life, right? Made a lot of money. Yeah. He's got some fame, chilling out now,
It's certainly a good deal.
Yeah.
It's a good deal. And it's funny because, you finally get a bit of a, even the couple times we've had him on since he's retired, you finally get that full measure of his personality. And it's oh, he is really charming and kind of fun to talk to and be around when he's not under that pressure, of being the guy, and all that stuff we saw with it, literally in the type of pressure that broke Mark Turgeon. It's living with that is not easy. And, that's not to say that all that bullshit about, Maryland fans, were the reason that he went out, but certainly it is a job that comes with some pressure. So
we got
seeing him kind of relieved of that.
You got a few minutes till Dohn. What do you guys think about? What's your thoughts on the upcoming season? Better, more optimism than usual, or post-Talia concerns?
Well, how about I bring up our spreadsheet, my spreadsheet that we do every year. Let's add that in, and that'll tell you guys how we're feeling. We have the predictions for all three of us plus Hoagie. We started that last year, and I got his predictions again. We got 4 analytics sites predictions: ESPN, FBI, Massey, K Ford, and team rankings. And then there's the averages. When you take the averages, it comes out to 6.69 victories.
Nice.
So the same as the last 3 years, really. Right?
I mean, pretty much, right? I think the Vegas over-under in most places is 6.5, right? Maybe 5.5. But yeah, I think just overall, obviously the quarterback situation is number one with a bullet. But to me, I think really it's just the offense and where they can get it together, starting with the offensive line with all those replacement parts. Offensive line requires so much cohesion for it to really work as a unit, and I worry about bringing in all these new guys. Even if they end up being good, it's still going to be tough to do, building a portal offensive line, basically. And I think the defense will probably be the best defense we've seen here in quite some time. If the secondary can hold up, it looks like it probably will. I think Glenn Miller, with Trader brings some stuff. Perry looked good at corner. If the Husky kid is pretty good, then you're probably already at the starters and hope that a couple guys behind them can come in. So you on top of the front seven, which I think is almost assuredly going to be the best front seven we've seen since maybe even the Ralph years. So I guess if you scouting out the season, you could imagine a season way less with way less shootouts in the way that Leah was just slinging around last year. They might try and play a little more clock control. They might run the ball a little bit more option, especially if Billy's behind center. Try and grind out some 28-17 wins as opposed to the big scores, because that defense is going to keep you in it most of the time. It's just a matter whether the offense can score enough to win.
Yeah, I
and the big question
is really good.
Big question is the quarterback, Jeff. Everybody's speculating. I gave my prediction. Loxley said he knows who it is, but he's not announcing it yet. My prediction is that they both play. That's the twist. And Billy starts, but they both play, and MJ gets up to a third of the snaps, even if Maryland has a big enough lead and all that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Billy will start. I mean, he was the guy in the spring. In the spring, everybody assumed as soon as you get a 4-star transfer like MJ Morris, he's the guy. You wouldn't have gone and gotten him if he's not going to start. They promised him a job, and sometimes that stuff is true. In this case, it was not true. He was brought in to compete, and I think they just are in love with Billy Edwards. The whole package, the intangibles, the leadership, the toughness. Loxley said in his press conference, I picked the guy who I picked because you couldn't tell when he was playing with the first, second, or third team, you couldn't tell which team he was playing with, meaning that he was, keeping it all together and keeping it all organized, getting everybody on the same page. And, that sounds pretty much like Billy Edwards' MO. I could see Morris playing, but I'm not sure if he's clear-cut number 2. I think I've been told Cam Edge had a really good camp, so it could be. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like an or situation between those two as the backup. But then you also wonder, do you want to play 2 quarterbacks in case if Billy doesn't play great and then you put in Morris or Edge and they have a great second half, are you causing friction that you don't necessarily need to cause? But, long story short, I think it'll be Billy Edwards.
Paul, hearing anything through your back channels?
I've heard the same stuff from the get-go that MJ is very talented. He's got all the tools. He certainly picked up the offense in between spring ball and fall camp a whole lot better. He looks a lot better in fall camp, but I would just be shocked if they don't give Billy a chance to take it from the get-go. You've got a really soft schedule, up through basically halfway through the season. So like they've got some time to kind of figure it out if it is more of an or situation. But I got to imagine Billy lines up behind center to start, and then you see what happens. But I don't think he'll be given, a giant rope necessarily if he sucks out there, if he's not getting it done. Because clearly they really considered this an actual competition. So, he's not just going to play through a, 7-22 kind of game against Michigan State, right? They're gonna give some other guys a chance if he's not getting it done.
And he's getting the benefit of having been around and being so popular to where sometimes there's a dynamic where you don't want to piss off the other players, who all have grown to know him and like him for the past few years. So kind of a tie goes to the runner situation. Maybe the tie goes to the guy who's been around and who they think that all the players will step up their game for, So when it's that kind of situation and you've got everything else potentially that you need to have a great season, with the caveat that we don't know necessarily about the offensive line yet, you can't give them a ton of rope, like Paul said, because, you need to win. And that Virginia's not that good, Michigan State's not that good, but they're both capable of beating you if you're getting bad quarterback play. So I agree. He needs to have assuming he's the guy, he could really benefit by having a good opening performance.
During the summer, I got really itchy for college football, and I texted you guys. I watched all 4 games that MJ Morris played for NC State, and I texted you guys about it. It wasn't overwhelming. It was, you could see that the first game, it took them a while to kind of get into it. You could see their like nerves or whatever, like just getting used to it. And he kind of got better and he got more under control. And you could see every once in a while he'd sling an amazing pass and you could see the arm strength. And then you could see every once in a while he'd make a great run. But then also there was some bad decisions. And so it was never overwhelming, like, wow, this guy is the man.
Yeah.
And even besides that, I went to the message board, NC State's message board at the time, and I read the game threads too. And right afterward, when he decided to transfer, and they were all really upset when they first heard about it because they're like, what's going on? Why isn't he playing? And then he announces the transfer, and they're like, this is BS. That once they found out that he was leaving, they turned on him, and they started saying he was abandoning his team, which you'd imagine probably Maryland fans might say the same thing in a similar situation. But at the initial reaction was they were really upset, which is good because for us, for Maryland, right? Because that's good. That means we're getting somebody, Maryland's getting somebody that NC State didn't want to lose. So it's kind of a mixed bag for me watching those games.
Yeah, he's the upside guy. Edwards is he is who he is kind of guy. Whether who he is good enough to get you 8 or 9 wins, nobody knows. But Morris still seems like he's maybe, he's farther away from his ceiling. And then Cam Edge, like I said, Cam Edge might have the strongest arm out of the 3 of them. I mean, I heard, he dropped 15 pounds. He was at like 240 in the spring. He's like 225 now, moving a little better. So I wouldn't be surprised if he plays at some point.
I'm curious whether Locks adjusts the offense for Billy versus MJ. Like it seems like you could imagine MJ running a similar offensive and kind of play style to what Leah was doing, whereas Billy, that's not what you want him out there for. You want to kind of start mixing in that read option stuff that he does really well because his toughness and his legs are what's going to make him different. If you really start to focus on being able to run this misdirection stuff with RPOs, read options, being able to focus on Hemby and hopefully Nolan Ray as well, that's going to open up the passing game for him. Like he's not a guy, even if he plays great to his potential, he's not a guy you want back there slinging the ball 40, 50 times a game. That is just not going to work for him. And especially with Maryland's defense being what we think it's going to be, I really wouldn't be surprised if he rolls with Billy and rolls out a much more ball control kind of offense. Like, hey, let's go build some first downs, take 6 or 7 minutes off the clock and score, and then count on our defense to keep us in the game. Whereas if it's MJ, you can imagine them just being like, all right, screw it. Let's roll out the Leah playbook and let's wing it.
You can imagine that what you just said is making me think if they're down in a game and they're like, hey, we need a change up. And then all of a sudden this guy comes in who's got this dynamic capability. At least there's the chance that some of that stuff happens. And maybe you got a little secret weapon when you're trying to make comebacks in a game.
Well, it certainly gives you.
Go ahead, Paul.
I was just saying, it certainly gives you a built-in excuse to throw MJ out there. If you're down in one of these games, you should be winning in September. Be like, well, look, we just want to, we get him out there and sling it around a little bit and see how it goes. If we can come back and win this thing, as opposed to quote unquote benching him. But I don't know. Who knows what's going through their heads, man. Locks is old school with that stuff. He doesn't want to give away anything.
Hey, Jeff, what time is Brian Dohn joining us?
I think 8.
8. Okay, so we got 14 minutes. All right. How about some other areas? We've talked about the defense a little bit. A lot of people talking about the front seven. Paul, you just did, about how it might be the best Maryland's had since the early Ralph years. What about the offensive line? There's been some reports lately that maybe they're looking a little better than expected.
Yeah, I mean, Locks has spoken pretty highly of them, but he did also say there's going to be some rough patches early on, especially because he's got, they took that huge class of offensive linemen last year. So a lot of those guys are playing as true freshmen. I think they'll be, I don't think he's putting out a depth chart, but he has one internally at least. And, there's going to be 2 or 3 true freshmen offensive linemen on the depth chart, which you almost never see because guys just usually aren't ready. And then you're also counting on these, these new guys and these holdovers from last year. But, I think they feel like at least at tackle, Alan Herron, the transfer from smaller school in Georgia, they like him a lot. You look at the guys, they've had success with those transfers from smaller levels of college football last year. Gottlieb, I'd say, was really good. Corey Bullock, I think I saw on Twitter, he had the highest grade of any Ravens offensive lineman during the preseason. I think he's on the practice squad, but still they've done a good job developing and using those guys. So if Herron can be as good or better than those guys, and then Andre Roy, they've been raving about Andre Roy. Was a big time recruit a few years ago, wasn't able to add enough weight to really play the past few years. Now they say he's much bigger and stronger and looking really good. I think in the middle, Josh Kaltenberger, the transfer from Purdue at center, will be an upgrade. Maybe not a star, but hasn't been a very strong position for them the past few years. The real question is the guard spots. You need, Aliyu Ba, the kid from transfer from Georgia. He was a pretty highly ranked recruit, but, didn't really make a splash there. So he's an unknown. Kyle Long, the veteran. Isaac Bunyan, who got switched over from the defensive line. So there's a lot of question marks, on the inside, especially at guard there. But, I think they feel good about it. But I think also even for them, even for coaches, it's hard to know exactly how they're going to hold up against real opponents.
They've got like 3 offensive line coaches now, which tells you how much they're concerned about that position.
Yeah, I think that helps too. That was a smart move trying to coach these.
Yeah.
Brian Braswell, I feel like has done a good job with them, but then everybody made a joke about bringing on Brian Ferentz. Well, it's not like you're bringing him on as an assistant coach or offensive coordinator. You're bringing him in as an analyst, so he's just there. He's a walk around coach, and then obviously Damian Robluski has 30 years of offensive line coaching. So yeah, this was definitely the year to make that move. And that's going to tell the tale that in quarterback, obviously, as we've been saying for what feels like 10 years now, because the defense looks really stout.
The skill positions, that seems to be the best area on the offense, certainly. The wide receivers and the running backs.
Yeah, Felton Prather has got to be a top, at least top 8 or so 1-2 punch in the Big Ten, I would think, at receiver. And I think Prather is probably underrated. I don't think we've seen the best out of him. I have a feeling he could have a really big year.
Yeah, and then it's really about, can you get Knotts or Octavian Smith or somebody to kind of emerge in the slot? I think last year with Jayshon Jones coming back and really kind of taking that slot role for himself, that kind of kind of shove them back down the depth chart a little bit, whereas you really need one of them to be a real go-getter this year. You need 500 yards out of them and be able to get some kind of really crucial stuff over the middle, third downs and whatnot. And both of those guys are 4-star recruits. They're both, juniors or redshirt sophomores at this point. Like, you need one of those guys to step up. It just has to happen now. After that, there's a lot of question marks on that side of the ball too. You get an injury to Ty or Prather, you don't have a lot of guys out there you can throw to. In terms of running backs, Hemby is Hemby. You know, he's going to be dependable. He can catch the ball a little bit out. Obviously, Nolan Ray is the one who's getting all the kind of like camp whispers about the guy who's going to emerge. And that wouldn't surprise me. And it really wouldn't surprise me if you do see Billy in more of a run-oriented misdirection type offense, you know, getting him balls out of the backfield, getting him out into space, because he's really dynamic.
Yeah, he's the guy. Out of all the unknowns, he's the guy I'm most interested to see, because it's gone through camp, but it was also even last year they started raving about him and like talking about him like he's the future. So I'm really interested to see what Nolan Ray can do. I think they posted times 40 or whatever the measurement was, and he was the fastest guy on the team during the summer. So that'll be fun to see also. And then tight end, I mean, you know, they've got some serious talent there too. Preston Howard is, if he can stay healthy, a potential NFL kind of guy. And they say Dylan Wade is probably just as good as him. So I think that, you know, they're looking good there. Neither one of those guys is a bruising blocker, but neither was Corey Dyches. You know, he was tiny compared to those guys. So
Howard's a big guy, at least.
Yeah, he's about 230 or so.
Yeah, Wade's more of a kind of like Chig, you know, like he's going to get out there and do his damage with his athleticism.
Yeah. So, I mean, the skill talent, I think you're right, definitely, Paul. It's going to be quick hitters, screen passes, you know, RPO, stuff to get the ball out quickly. It's not going to be nearly as many, assuming, again, that it's Billy Edwards. There's not going to be nearly the deep shots that they took under Talia, which is probably fine because it felt like he missed 90% of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, Leah was terrible at deep balls last year. That's the great irony of it. I mean, we threw a ton of them and we hit like none of them. This first couple of years, we hit a lot more, certainly. But yeah, I mean, there's so many question marks. It's actually really kind of exciting in a way. I mean, it's scary because it's always scary when Maryland doesn't have an established quarterback. But it'll be real exciting on Saturday just to see what, you know, how they show up and what they start to look like.
Jeff, we just did our drinks almost coordinated, and the opposite hands was.
Yeah, that was weird.
That was almost.
That was really weird.
It was really weird.
You complete me, Larry. You complete me.
Yeah. Do you think the wide receivers are they're rooting for MJ because of that reason? Like they want, or Cam, because they want somebody who's going to be slinging it.
I think they love Billy. I think the players love Billy Edwards, and that's at least somewhat of a factor in him being the guy. And they feel like, you know, that he's the sort of guy who will make everybody around him 10 or 20% better. You know, we'll see if that's the case. Obviously, the game manager archetype leaves you very little margin for error because you don't have those deep balls and those kind of things. But I think with those two really fast running backs and with his with his running ability, obviously he's not blazing fast, but he's powerful, tough, and has a little bit of shiftiness. You know, I think the hope is probably you can get defenses coming up, bring him up in the box, and then he can take advantage.
Well, and the dirty little secret about playing wide receiver at Maryland is you don't get on the field unless you can block your ass off. Like Loxley is very, very concerned about that. And I think that's part of the reason we haven't always seen some of these kind of freshman, sophomore, high recruits hop on the field early because they're not blocking to the degree that Loxley requires them to. Certainly the effort that's required. So, like, I'm not sure these guys won't mind getting out there on the edge and punishing some guys if Billy's going to be running the ball a little more as a quarterback than you ever saw Leah, or at least certainly late stage Leah.
We haven't talked about the secondary on defense yet. There's some returners that are highly touted, but there's a lot of question marks there, right? New guys.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest question, like Paul said, is in the secondary. Safety, you're in great shape. Dante Trader's a really good player. And then, you know, if you ask people inside the program, some of them will tell you Glenn Miller's the best player they have on defense overall. He just wasn't a big name, kind of worked his way up through the system. Obviously last year had a really good
Stuck
year.
behind Braid, really. That's all.
Yeah, he was stuck behind and, mixing it up a little bit at nickel and playing a couple positions. But so they're good there. Defensive line is very stout. I mean, it is just a bunch of mature, huge, physical dudes. Obviously Jordan Phillips is the biggest name, 6'3", 320 or whatever he's checking.
He's the biggest dude.
Yeah, massive. But then you have Tommy Akingbusote right next to him, almost the same size. You got Tyzay Johnson, Donnell Brown. These guys are all, Fuller, Quayshawn Fuller. So there's just a ton of veterans up front. And the same thing at linebacker. Ruben Hippolyte's been around for 25 years. They've got some young talent, Caleb Wheatland and Wyatt, Kellen Wyatt. Those guys have improved, and then there's some younger
Michael
guys.
Harris looked good at times. Neo Avery is healthy, and that you want to talk about camp whispers. Neo Avery is the one that's been like, watch out, this dude's a pro kind of stuff that I've heard and seen a little bit of. I would just say with the secondary, I think again, you count on another transfer to come in Husky. You hope that he's good. Perry Fisher looks excellent. His size is huge, especially once he's going against those, the 3 or 4 pros that Ohio State and Oregon are going to throw at you when you play them. It's the depth. Behind those 2 guys, you got pretty much nobody that you can count on. So a lot of highly talented guys, but they got
a lot of young guys. A lot of young guys playing. I think Judah Jenkins is a true freshman who was committed to Indiana for a while, kid from good counsel. They flipped him on signing day. He wasn't that highly touted, but from what I've heard, he's looked maybe as good as any of the true freshmen. And then Kevin Humes, who they snagged late in the process last year, a kid from St. Francis Academy. He reclassified up and signed with them. They think he's going to be really good. Braden Lee, I saw ESPN picked him for its freshman All-American team. So there's young talent there, but that's not a position where you're not going to learn by fire. So that's definitely, along with, QB and offensive line on the other side, that's probably the biggest one to watch on defense.
We will be having Brian Dohn join us in 1 minute. Before we do that, Jeff, we haven't talked about the special teams. There were some issues there last year. What are you thinking of this year so far?
It's been really quiet on the kicking game. I keep meaning to ask how that's shaping up. I'll have to check on that. But otherwise, it's a lot of the same guys. They feel like they have some explosive return men. Braden Wisłowski, obviously, is a guy who's got really good speed. He showed it last year, had the one big kick return. Octavian Smith obviously is really slippery. They say that he's, stepped, they were waiting for Knotts and Shalik Knotts and Octavian Smith to kind of come out of the cocoon, both of them being now third-year guys who were 4-star receivers or 4-star recruits. A lot was expected of. It sounds like Smith has made more strides during the offseason. So, I think they'd be solid on special teams, but, there's not like a proven standout there, I wouldn't say.
Okay. That's our football preview. When we get back on the other side of Brian Dohn, we'll talk about some recruiting for football and basketball. So I know you basketball nerds will want to stick around for that.
Well, and plus you'll have to get through our predictions. We have Larry's spreadsheet. We can't just let
predictions
go away.
We have our predictions. All right, let's add Mr. Brian Dohn. I said that correctly. Brian Dohn. I got it. I know.
How
are you?
I'm well. I'm ready for I tell you what, the weekend was kind of like, all right, kind of fun. Watch a little college football. I know there's some really bad games on tomorrow night, but I can't wait to watch tomorrow night.
Who cares?
Hey, we thought that was going to be a bad game in Ireland on Saturday too, didn't we?
Yeah, well, I know
there was a lot of people. A lot of people like talking about the game. I watched New Mexico, Montana State. Sorry,
no, I watched New Mexico. I watched it. Oh yeah, without question. Yeah, and then I was actually mad. I could not find the Hawaii-Delaware State game anywhere.
Oh wow,
we were searching for it. We couldn't find it. It was on some regional network only shown in Hawaii.
ESPN Honolulu. I don't know what that is, but that's what it said. And full disclosure, growing up, I used to I was fascinated with Hawaii. I used to have Hawaii shirts and a hat with the old, the UH and then the rainbow. And then I lived out in Los Angeles for a long time. And so it was a lot easier to watch Hawaii because the games would be on, at 9 o'clock instead of midnight. So,
but they're not the Rainbow Warriors. They're just the Warriors.
No, just the Warriors.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
I
really wish they would go back to that.
Yeah.
I loved it. I just loved the colors. It was kind of a brighter green. What do they call it? Like a Kelly green or something instead of dark green and black now. But man, how many people just tuned off because I'm talking Hawaii football?
No.
Hey man, people that listen to this podcast, they're the type who'd be fiending for Hawaii on week 0 at midnight. So
we only got 3 people watching anyway. Don't worry about it. All right.
We're all here.
Yes.
You mean for this? I thought you meant for the game. Yeah.
No. I'm joking. All right. Maryland's 2025 class. I'll just leave it open-ended. What do you think so far?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done a fantastic job. And, I think it's easy to sit there and say, well, geez, they got Malik Washington, they get Jalen Gilchrist, Messiah Delhomme. There's a couple other kids that I really like just in terms of, maybe not as high as rated, but I love Carlton Smith as players. Zaire Smith has speed, Justin Devon. I love Iverson Howard. I've seen him play a few times. So there's guys like that. And I think it's easy to sit there and say, well, geez, Maryland really stepped up its NIL game. And I think for every school that lands some big-time kids, I think there is a little bit of truth in that. But the reality is a little different to me. Listen, Maryland won 3 straight bowl games, right? They're having success under Loxley. And this stuff takes time. We are no longer in an era where a couple local kids want to stay home, who are really highly rated. Now, all the highly rated kids want to go to programs that are winning. So it takes a little bit longer to build it. And you look at Malik Washington, the quarterback that Locks landed, he put years into that recruitment. And it didn't matter who the assistants were. Mike Loxley was the one leading the recruitment, so much so that I had Malik and a couple other people tell me that Locks took over coaching the quarterbacks just for Malik because that was something that really resonated with Malik. And so I think you have to, go a little deeper into it. I think some of the assistants he hired are really good recruiters. I mean, we all know about Azar Abdul-Rahim, from back in the Friendship Collegiate days. But then you look at, the old line coach Braswell. He's real. I spent a few days down in Virginia Beach. I was at Messiah Delhomme School. I was with Jalen Gilchrist when he announced, and I was at Green Run talking to some guys there. And Green Run always has kids. And everywhere I went, they were talking about, well, Braswell has respect down in the 757. And so I think, you really have to dig a little bit deeper. But for me, the starting point is they're winning. Now the next step is kind of get to some bigger bowls, but kids want to see progress. They want to see winning. And I think more than anything, that has been the reason why you've seen the uptick in recruiting.
Brian, how good is Malik Washington? You feel like because next the quarterback job could be wide open next year. We know true freshmen are rarely able to handle that load, but what do you feel like his upside is?
It's huge. I mean, I've been on the Malik Washington bandwagon since I saw him at Elite 11 in 2023, right? So we're going back. That was I think late May of 2023. So look, I wasn't a math major, but I think that's about 15 months ago. And I liked him before that, just from seeing some highlights and talking to some people in the DMV. But after seeing him, I believe on that day, I'm not saying he was the best overall, but on that day, I thought he had the best day just in terms of throwing it, arm strength, poise. And then you start looking at the athleticism, and people wonder why we care about whether guys run track or they wrestle or they play basketball, because some of the athleticism he shows on a basketball court is elite. And so then you think of putting that in the quarterback spot. And then, so I wanted to see how it all fit together on the field. So I went and watched him play in November. He knows his reads. He can get through progressions. He doesn't get rattled. Throws a really nice ball, a really good deep ball. When he makes mistakes, he doesn't dwell on it. And Jeff, I know the quarterback situation with Talia being gone is kind of up in the air with Maryland from talking to you all the time and just some reading, some of the stuff that you write. But you don't know what it's going to be. And I think you're right that it's really hard for freshmen to come in and play. And in ideal world, somebody can play next year and you can kind of get him some reps and kind of get him experience. But I mean, he's the guy. Like this is the guy Locks has waited for. This is the guy Maryland fans have waited for. His ceilings. Look, we have him as a 4-star, so we think he's an NFL kid, right? And so he has the size, he has the arm strength, he's smart. He's really, he's one of those kids that first time I went and met with him at his school, I didn't, we would talk or DM or whatever, and you talk to him, and you feel like you've known him forever. He's really relaxed, and it shows with some of the people that, and how recruiting has gone, and these kids kind of gravitate toward him because the DMV is really close on the youth level. Like all those kids play with each other, play against each other, and when they go to the high schools, they still know each other. Go to Under Armour camp, and you got 30 kids sitting together in an end zone because they all know each other, and they're, a lot of them are prospects. And so I can't stress how important it was for him to pick Maryland, what it means to their class, what it means to look. It's not only recruiting now; it should help him in the 26 class as well. And then it's up to him to put it all together and for them to bring him along the right way. Very few freshmen can play and have a lot of success. So you have to make sure that when he's in there, that he doesn't, get hit a lot and kind of destroy confidence and all that stuff. So bring him along slow. But Jeff, I think in a couple years, the idea is you're going to be talking about him as being a guy that elevated their program to, whatever that next step is.
Yeah, he definitely reminded me a bit of Kasim Hill in terms of a recruit, like a local guy who kind of
much better player.
Better player, obviously.
No. You know what it is, Paul? He could be what Dwayne Haskins was supposed to be.
Let's not talk about that. Let's not.
I think
forgetting everything after the fact.
Yeah.
No. But I think Jeff, I think that's really accurate. I think Malik has a real genuineness to him that people gravitate toward. And people want to go play with really good quarterbacks. And I think that's what he is.
Brian, I want to talk a bit about what you touched on earlier with NIL. I know that's not your beat necessarily, but you can't do your job without kind of being a part of the deal. Loxley talks a lot about how for him, NIL is much more about player retention than securing recruits. And coaches talk and coaches act. I don't know how much that is talking versus acting, but I'm curious from your perspective, how much you see current schools, where the top schools are on their way down, spending their NIL money on recruits versus spending them on keeping players where they are.
You have to do both. And for Maryland, for a while, that's what it was. And I can't remember if I shared this story last time I was on with you guys or if I told Jeff on the side one day, but, Maryland had a kid transfer this past year, and they could have kept them, but they weren't going to go with what the asking price was. But they also had some younger kids at the position that they wanted to get moving forward and really have them play. And so it's not just using your money for retention; it's using money for the retention in a smart way. I think that's part of it. And what I've seen with Maryland in this class is, look, there's no way to put it. They've upped their game in terms of what they're doing NIL related for high school kids. That's just from talking to kids, their families, some NIL folks, and going in different directions. But I don't think I think there's so much. It used to be when a kid didn't commit to a school, it was we never wanted them anyway. And now when you don't get a kid, it's always, well, the other school just paid more. And that's not really the case in most situations. I mean, I'm seeing kids, for hundreds of $1,000s less go to schools just because of where they're comfortable. And in terms of like the NIL game, it's going to change once this settlement comes through. Everybody thinks this settlement's going to come through. You're going to have a roster, 105-ish, right around there. It may be a little north of that at the beginning, just because if you went with 105 now, every school will be cutting 30 walk-ons. But there's going to basically be a salary cap. You're going to have rev share, and then there'll still be NIL on top of that. But it's changing quickly, and I think that's what schools are talking to kids about right now. So whatever the NIL looks like right now, it's kind of a version of that, with the knowledge that some money that the schools are going to distribute and be allowed to distribute is part of the equation.
My kid got offered money from 2 different schools. He went to the one he got nothing from. So there you go. Same thing.
Yeah.
You talked about
6'10" power forward, in case you want to.
Yeah. No, I'm just saying
it's where you're comfortable.
Yeah.
Listen, I know enough people that make a lot of money that are miserable in their jobs, and it carries on through the rest of their life. And these kids that we're talking about, like, we can talk all you want about whether Jalen Gilchrist is getting more from South Carolina or Maryland. If Jalen Gilchrist develops, then the money he's getting in NIL is going to be pocket change in 5 years or whatever it is. But all that said, you still have to get through it. The time right now, there's no guarantees on any of this stuff. So I don't begrudge the kids for getting what they can get now, but to make it seem like it's always only about money, I think it's just I think it's lazy and a misrepresentation.
Brian Dohn is the national college football analyst for 24/7 Sports. You talked about the perception of Maryland with the recruits. You said it. You talked about the 757, and kind of tying that together with Maryland's improvement in recruiting this year. In order to get to another level with football, you need back to back to back to back. Basketball, you can have one class. You need it. Is what you're sensing, that perception change? Are you feeling like this is a sustainable thing, and then maybe even something that they could move even higher in the rankings?
Yeah, it is sustainable, because that's what you want. You don't want stagnation, and you don't want to slide back. You want to continue to recruit really good players. And one thing about the rankings is I think Maryland sits 23rd right now, right?
Yep.
But if you sit there and you look at the number of commits that they have compared to some of the other schools, like, they have 22 commits. There's some schools that have 25, 26 commits, and you get more points for having more commits. It's just the way it is. The thinking is more depth. And so I don't get caught up in where a team is ranked. Look, if you're 23rd or 18th or 25th, it's all the same to me. Now, if you're 6th compared to 23rd, or if you're 44th compared to 23rd, that's where you see the difference. And I think they're starting to stack some guys. They need to make sure they continue to recruit the offensive line. It's still the toughest position to recruit, because there's just not enough good players out there. And I think that's where, you have to be smart as a program, whether you're Maryland or Purdue or Illinois or Rutgers or whatever, is, you're not going to go out and spend $800,000 for an offensive tackle that can get you, because you can get some other players too. But you go out and get some depth through the portal, but you still have to develop. You hear about programs being developmental programs. Well, surviving with 30 transfers a year that you bring in is not realistic. So you need to, build your culture, make sure you have the right guys around. And for me, Maryland has to continue to recruit the offensive line well. That's why the Gilchrist thing is so big. Is I think he's the kind of kid that can play as a freshman, and by the time he's a sophomore, can really be a cornerstone on the offensive line at one of the guard spots. I mean, he's really athletic, he's powerful, he's strong, all that stuff. And so they just have to keep stacking the offensive linemen in their program. They have talent in a lot of other areas.
Who are the can't miss guys in the DMV in the 26 class?
Yeah, I don't do can't miss guys, to be honest, Jeff.
Okay, who are the
I mean, I'll just put it this way. Like if you say can't miss, I mean, none of this stuff is can't miss, because this is football, man. You are one play away from injury, one play away from your career being over. And, I was talking to somebody today about another kid, just who didn't really pan out and hasn't really taken off the way they wanted him to take off. And I said, well, what happened? I mean, this is a kid that was a multi-sport athlete at another, in high school. Everybody wanted him. I mean, everybody wanted him. He wound up at a school, and I'm like, okay, so what do we, what's the problem? Well, you know what? He works hard, but he doesn't have the toughness, or he doesn't, and so I don't think of can't misses, but I do look at kids like Zion Ely at St. Francis. I think he's our number 2 player. I mean, if he's a number 2 player, we think pretty highly of him, right? So him, I do think he has his sights more set on Oregon. He's at St. Francis. There's Jari Edwards is a stud at St. Francis. Kahari Adams, who I just wrote about today, he's got a Notre Dame visit coming up. There's some really good ones. Damon Hall, who's already committed to Maryland, I think is a good player. There's the offensive lineman at Georgetown Prep, Emmanuel Nacho, I think he's how he says his last name. I mean, there's some really good players in Maryland. But I think also when you're looking at 26, Jeff, it's more, this is who we know right now. And there's going to be some kids that make some big jumps because this is going to be their first time either playing a significant role, or there's a big difference between being a 15 or 16-year-old sophomore and a 17-year-old junior.
Hey, Brian, I'm curious. I know in your world there's always more kids to scout because there's always more classes coming up. But I'm also curious whether you guys do any kind of after-the-fact quality control, looking back at last year's class, the year before, thinking about how you guys did, scouting them and ranking them versus how they performed in college, and whether you're able to kind of take that knowledge and think, okay, well, maybe we do need to, think a little bit less about scouting 7 and 7s in the summer and more about watching film when they're playing high school, or, one-on-one camps versus, what the tape looked like, that kind of thing. And I'm also kind of curious how you feel like you guys did dealing with all those COVID classes where you didn't get to do a lot of those camps and some of that on-campus stuff, and how that affected your world.
Yeah. I can only speak for myself with how things are done. I know how other people do it, but I can speak to myself. I am constantly, look, if you get a kid right, we all have jobs, right? If no news is good news, right? So if you got a kid right, you're not going to sit there and be like, hey, wow, why did I get that kid right?
Right.
I know I watch all the time to find out why I got kids wrong. What happened? Why is there a miss? Whether he's rated too high or too low. What's the reason for the miss? Is it because I didn't know that he was going to grow 3 inches when he got to college? I didn't know that when he was going through his senior year in high school, there were tons of problems at home and they got rectified, and now he's in a solid situation at college? Or, maybe a kid had every advantage while he was in high school, and so he was already physically maxed out and, really coached up great in high school. So there wasn't much room for growth once he got to college. Are you talking about kids that are eating 3 squares a day at home? Or, I've been to schools where they keep peanut butter and jelly and bread in the coach's office because some kids don't have the ability to eat 3 meals a day. And so how do things react with that? Now you're going to deal with the NIL world where, great, kid's really good in high school, big time prospect. And now all of a sudden he's got 400, 500K in his bank account. And does he stay hungry? So there's some of that. And so I'm always going back, and it's watching film, and it's talking to coaches. Like, I know, some of my, one of the guys that I think does a really good job in Maryland is Steve Rapp at Wise High School. And Steve also runs a 7-on-7 team, Maryland Flex. So he sees a lot of kids down there. And when I have questions about kids, he's one of the guys I'll call. Like, hey, what do you think there? Quince Orchard with John Kelly, he's been there. He produced great players. John, what do you think of this kid who you played? And so you get some information that way. And so I think for me, when you stop trying to learn why you got something wrong then just stop, right? And then what are we doing? I mean, you're always trying to get better. And when you're ranking a kid, you're always trying to find out, did you get it right? All right, that's the biggest thing. Did you do right by the kid? The fans are going to get mad or happy with whoever you ranked, they have their opinions. But to me, it's always, did I do right by the kid? And so that's important to me. And then for the COVID stuff, it was hard, man. It was hard, just like it was for the schools. You look at schools, and there was a lot of attrition in those classes because, I remember kids were sending me the workouts that the schools would send them to tape. And it include like get on the scale and show your weight, put your wingspan, do your agility drills. There was nothing.
Combine stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was combine stuff to where you're like, you're asking 17-year-olds to do combine stuff. So it's not always the best view, or it's, great. They ran a, whatever their time was, but how many times did they run it before they got it? Kind of deal, stuff like that.
Who's running the stopwatch? Like mom, like
yeah. But on the flip side is, and I remember at the time, we would talk about it as a recruiting team. Recruiting was the only thing going on in sports to where there was daily happenings. It's funny to think about now. Not funny, but it's interesting to think about now. Right now, if you want to talk to a kid, you just do a Zoom, WebEx, whatever you want to call it, right? You just get them on there and you talk, kind of like we are. Nobody did this stuff before COVID. Coaches weren't sitting there saying, hey, let's get this kid on a WebEx and offer him at 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
And so what it did was it really changed recruiting, and it changed face-to-face contact, and that's good and bad. Look, I have a college sophomore and a college junior, and I can't imagine, a high school junior, and I can't imagine them like FaceTiming with coaches for a half hour. Now, my older one plays lacrosse in college, so he was, for him to talk on the phone for 15, 20 minutes with a coach was, oh my goodness, so I can't imagine what these kids go through with all these WebExes that they still do now. And, it puts a lot more pressure on the kids, but I think COVID changed a lot about how we evaluate things and about how recruiting is done, good and bad.
Brian, you've been on the show with us before. You know how we ended with the 5 rapid fire fill in the blank questions. So say the first thing that comes to your mind. Here we go. Number 1, Maryland's record in 2024 will be
good.
Your surprise team to make the college football playoff is?
Oh man.
The Hawaii Warriors.
Yeah. I'm going to go Boise State.
The next teams to join the Big Ten will be?
Oh, I love that question. The
Hawaii Warriors.
No, wait. I got to make sure. This is a good one. I am going to say North Carolina and Georgia Tech.
There you go.
Okay. Your go-to tailgate food and drink is?
Listen, man, I'm in Jersey. It's a pork roll, egg, and cheese.
Okay. The greatest musical artist of all time is?
Are we talking band or artist?
I said musical artist. Up to you.
Musical artist? I love Ozzy. We're going Ozzy.
Oh, that's bold for a guy in Jersey.
All right.
Hey, listen, man, I like Bruce and all, but let's be honest. Like, I can sit there and watch Sabbath stuff on TikTok or TV or whatever till 4 a.m. every day. It is absolutely mesmerizing to me what they were doing in the early days before anybody knew what heavy metal was.
Amen.
All right, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. You were great as always. And I intentionally did not ask you to predict where Maryland's recruiting class will be. I know you won't answer anyway. So.
Hey, yeah, I won't. Just like I didn't with the record because I haven't studied their schedule.
You did the same thing, yeah.
But because I haven't looked at the schedule, right? I mean, but
it'll be good, right?
Maryland's
it'll be good.
Look, if I'm a Maryland fan, I'm tickled that this could be the new norm for recruiting.
Yeah.
Yeah, get us in the 20s. I'm pretty happy most of the time.
That's the big takeaway from this for me anyway. So thank you for joining us. I know Jeff's going to ping you again at some point to come back. So
guys, I'll come on anytime you want. Just let me know.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Brian.
man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
There he was, Brian Dohn. I like a lot of what he said. I like how he said Maryland's got clout in the 7x7, and there's all this positive perception of the program now. That's huge.
I just like the lack of bullshit, honestly. Like it's tough. I mean, that is a tough job. Everybody hates you. Yeah. Everybody's mad at you for ranking this kid too low, or commits to Penn State and their ranking goes up or something. And like that's a tough job. But like every time we've had him on, like I've tried to personally, like it's easy just to ask about, how good is Malik Washington, but like I like to dig into what they do and like what drives it, like what matters. And clearly, like that's a guy who puts a lot of thought and effort into what he does. I mean, physically going and traveling to go see games for like one or two recruits when he's, in charge of a database of thousands of high school kids, like, that's putting in the work. And like, it makes me feel a little more confident, when you read the rankings and you're just like, okay, well, if Dohn said it, I believe him. He might be wrong, but he's not bullshitting you. This is what he thinks. And if it works out, great. If it doesn't, whatever. But yeah, I don't know, this makes you feel better about the whole process. Cause it's a tough gig.
Paul, you looking down on Jeff's question? Because that's what Jeff asked.
Did he ask?
Yes. How good is Malik Washington?
I mean, obviously my questions are better, but I didn't need to tell the people that. They know that.
Yeah.
I will say, first off, you're right, Paul. People hating him because there was a kid who just committed to another Big Ten school Maryland was recruiting, and he stopped talking to anybody from 24/7 like a month ago because he was upset that he wasn't a 4-star anymore. And then also, he obviously has not been studying Larry because he said sometimes you get it wrong because you don't know if a kid's going to get any bigger. He didn't know he was going to get 3 inches bigger.
That's right.
We all know you just say, are you going to get any bigger?
That's right.
He said taller. If he said bigger, it would have triggered me immediately. I just would have started laughing. But
you just got to ask him. Just got to ask him, can you get any bigger? And then they'll tell you.
Is he planning on getting any bigger?
Yeah. No, he's a hardworking dude. Always been one of my go-tos in football recruiting. Been doing it forever. Knows his stuff. Gets it. He gets out. He did some amazing coverage for us this summer, getting out. During that commitment spree, Jalen Gilchrist and Del Home and all that. So, as I think I posted at the time, he's a huge asset for 24/7.
Let's get into some recruiting. We're going pretty long here. Let's do some football recruiting. The 2025 class is kind of wrapping up. When you look at the player search and the rankings and all that, it doesn't look there's that many more Maryland might get in 25. Is that true? Now they're headed towards 26 class. I
mean, there's basically no uncommitted 2025 kids on their list. I'm sure they got a few they're quietly keeping warm or waiting to see how they do this season, but it's pretty much all just a select group of guys, 4-star types who are committed to other schools who they want to flip. And then you leave, obviously, a bunch of scholarships for the portal. Jeff Exenor, the kid from receiver from Baltimore, committed to Penn State. He's one, obviously, they'd kill to flip. Fahim Delane, who's at good counsel, committed to Ohio State. I think he's the number 2 safety in the country right now.
He'd be huge.
But so there's a handful of guys like that they'd love to flip, but it's a very unusual. I can't recall it being like this to where you're getting to, late August and there's basically no uncommitted high school guys, but that's, a tribute to the job they've done getting off to such a good start. And then also kind of a symptom of the portal where you want to leave some room, to get some of those guys.
Oh, and it gives you plenty of time to get started on the next class. And you always got locksmiths when you get close to the early signing day. So I mean, that's great for me. Like Dohn said, I think it is important to note. Like, I actually don't even care about the class ranking so much. I like the average commit column that they have, like where you average out the 87s, 91s, 85s, whatever, because that doesn't take into account how many kids you've got in the class. It just kind of goes by the quality of the kids you've got in the class. I actually meant beforehand to check and see where Maryland ranked on that, but I didn't, so whatever. But I don't know. It's a great class, and I think like you said, if you're in that kind of 20s range, there's not going to be that much of a difference between the 21st and 30th. So keep Maryland in that range. You keep us finishing our recruiting rankings better than generally what we finish ranked in the country in terms of results, you're probably doing all right for yourself.
Yeah, and like I said, you stack those together, and then you have a top 25 team after a few years.
If you can keep them.
Yeah, if you can
keep them. I mean, that's the thing now, isn't it? Right?
Yeah,
it's not just recruiting them anymore. You got to be able to pay to keep them.
As long as they don't do a Barham or a Chop Robinson on you, right?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the issue with the really high-ranked 5-star kids. If you get them in, can you keep them? Whereas I think the lower 3-star, 4-stars who maybe didn't have these massive offers might not see the stars, quote unquote, the stars when a Michigan comes offering a couple $100K to come play for them, for example. So I don't know. It's a changing world, and I'm just very happy we have Mike Loxley being the one that's here and in charge as this stuff's going on, because can you just even imagine if Edsel was still here during all this, or even Durkin? Like, we got very lucky. As terrible as everything that got us to this place, it feels like we're in about as good a position right now as this program's been in quite some time, and somebody who knows how to deal with this ever-changing landscape.
Jeff, let's give the basketball junkies a little bit. How about some basketball recruiting?
Yeah, it's getting to visit season, official visit season now. They have a lot of guys coming in soon. Omari Witherspoon is a guy, 6'4" guard from St. John's High School in D.C., who's climbed their list really quickly the past 2 months or so. He's taken a couple unofficials to Maryland. He'll be back for an official in about a month after visiting Virginia Tech and a few other schools. Maryland's his biggest offer. I think there's a chance he could be a guy who could be the first commitment in the class. Chris Jeffrey, another local guard, he's taking more visits. He's already visited Maryland. He's going to check out Ole Miss, Penn State, a couple others. Similarly, Maryland's definitely the biggest name on his list. Sean Abayev is a very interesting guy who blew up about a month and a half ago on the national radar. Kid from Israel, wing guy. They really like him. Competition's really tough there, though, so we'll wait and see on that. Marcus Jackson will be in, and I think about 10 days now, or about 2 weeks. Marcus Jackson is a really athletic 6'8" power forward from Baltimore. He's playing prep ball out in Arizona. I think he's risen to the top spot for them at the 4. They haven't had that kind of junkyard dog, super bouncy power forward type, like James Gist in the past, or even to some extent Boom Osby, just that tough athletic kind of guy. And then, I think obviously Jordan Scott at the 3 is probably their top priority there. He's, number 50 in the country right now overall, probably the highest rated. I think the highest rated guy among all these guys who are visiting. I feel like they're probably in the pole position there. It doesn't hurt that his mom, Christy Winters Scott, was a star at Maryland and now does analysis on games on TV and is at Maryland quite a bit for that too. So, that's the general scope of it. I think it's been a pretty slow summer. That portal season was crazy and everybody was fired up and there was commitments left and right. And then it just screeched to a halt for several months. And now that these guys are getting into that time of the year when you want to make your decision and take your visits before this basketball season starts, we'll have more action.
Does anybody want to hear me whine, or should I just save that for the next show? Because
it depends what it's about.
You know what it's about. I'm just fascinated because it seems like we spent the past year and a half talking about Nick Lewis, Caden Lewis, Chance Mallory, Cam Ward, Eric Reeby, like all these dudes, and then just they're gone. Like poof, just totally disappeared off the planet. Now we got all these other random guys that show up during the summer. I don't.
He's changed his mind on quite a few guys. No question about that. I think he's also embraced the portal more now, to where he's passing on some guys who maybe he would have gone for in previous years. Now he's had some success in the portal. I think they'll probably just take 3 high school recruits maybe and leave the rest, however many spots there are for the portal. But you're definitely right that he has. Oh, and I forgot Cam Ward, obviously from Largo. One of the top forwards out there, just does nothing but produce. He has an official visit scheduled. Early on, it seemed like they're in great shape. I feel like he's faded to some extent, but as long as he's still officially visiting, he's still clearly worth keeping tabs on. But you're right, there's been a lot of musical chairs on the prospect list.
And what's going on with Tyler Jackson? Is they still really pushing for him, or is that kind of like a whatever? I mean, because it doesn't feel great.
Yeah, I mean, people who watch or listen to the podcast know we had Derek Queen on a while back, and he predicted Tyler Jackson would be the next commitment. The two of them are really close friends. Tyler Jackson's I think he's number 43 nationally. His stock fell a little bit. He was in the 20s about a year ago. And it seemed like Maryland had cooled, and I think there's still a chance that they have, but he came out last week and said he plans to visit Maryland officially along with TCU and West Virginia. So, he's still, like Cam Ward, still on the board till he's not.
That's not a 5-star visit list, if we're being honest.
I was thinking the same thing.
Well, he hasn't been a 5-star in a little while. He had a tough summer this year, so his stock fell a little bit. He went to overtime elite, and last year it worked well for him. This summer it wasn't. He switched to AAU teams, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because the program has really taken on a Baltimore flavor lately with Queen, and then bringing in Kevin Norris from Baltimore as an assistant coach. Also Ricky Harris, their player personnel guys from Baltimore. So, if they want Tyler Jackson, you would think that they clearly should be able to get him, but we'll have to wait and see if they push for him.
All right, there's basketball, and now Paul's favorite part of every show. Here we go for the first time.
They're not even doing anything
in the 2024 season. The non-revs report with Tony Wheeler.
Hey everyone, this is Wheels with your Inside Maryland Sports non-revenue sports report. The non-revs have started, but are not yet in full swing. Really, we only have soccer playing right now. The women's soccer team has already played 4 of their games. They've won 1 with 2 draws, and they dropped a game against American. They play at Navy on Thursday night on ESPN Plus if you're interested in tuning in. On the men's side, the Terps dropped a 2-0 game to number 16 Georgetown after opening the season with a tie at UMBC. They welcomed Detroit Mercy on Friday on Big Ten Plus. They're hoping to get their first win of the season. 4th-ranked field hockey welcomes Louisville on Friday. Cross country participates in the Salisbury Classic this coming weekend as well. Golf and tennis, both the men's team and both men's and women, and the women's tennis team, they're still more than a week away from beginning their fall season, so stay tuned on those. And that's a wrap for your non-revenue sports report. Take care, everyone.
Hey, we give a minute to the non-res, Paul. 1 minute. Come on.
That Salisbury Classic has live show written all over it, I think.
Well, as long as Ocean City is considered Salisbury enough for you, I could pull that off.
We could
balcony on 51st Oceanside. We can make that work.
I'm good for that. I'm good with that. All right. We are going to finish the show with our predictions. We're going to go. I got a bunch of categories for you guys, and all 3 of us will give our predictions. And if you guys in the chat, guys want to jump in, throw your predictions as well, join us. You're more than welcome to do that. All right. We already all kind of said who our prediction for the starting QB is, but who do we think this year's offensive MVP will be?
Who are you asking?
All of us. So you can start. And then
okay. I'm going to go Caden Prather. I really feel, in the quarterback situation makes that a risky pick, but I really feel like he's an NFL guy. Unusual size, playmaking ability. It would be easy to say Roman Hemby probably, but for a bounce back year, but I'd go with Prather.
Paul?
Yeah, I was going to say the same. So in the spirit of not saying the same, I would say Preston Howard. I think he's going to get a lot of looks. I think he's gonna be the number one guy because he's got enough size to be a blocker, even if he's not a natural blocker, as he was a quarterback for most of his high school career. But I wouldn't be surprised if he breaks out and has like a kind of, 600 receiving yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns, kind of, becomes really the number 3 receiver, so to speak, from the tight end position.
By the end of the year, Roman Hemby will be second all time in yards from scrimmage in Maryland history. Second. This is one of the things we talked about when we talked about him in the show with Ralph. But the reason he's going to do that is because of the emergence of Andre Roy. That is my offensive MVP. He's going to be the surprise offensive MVP.
That's the most hipster pick I've ever heard.
There we go. There we go.
I mean, if Andre Roy is the offensive MVP, we're probably doing all right for ourselves on that side.
Yes. All right. Next one is obvious. Let's go defensive MVP. Jeff.
I'll go Glenn Miller. I keep hearing he might be the best player on the defense, maybe on the team. I know that sounds like really high praise, all things considered, because he doesn't have the profile of some of these other guys. If it's not him, it's probably Jordan Phillips. That's probably the safer bet. But I'll go Glendon Miller. I think he's going to have a big year.
Paul.
I feel like Donnell Brown is going to be the sack master we haven't had in quite some time. He had a lot of success doing that, getting off the edge last year. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes and puts up 8, 9, 10 sacks for the season as real disruptive force.
And Jeff, you mentioned mine. I am going with Jordan Phillips. He's not going to have sack numbers. He's just going to be a monster in the middle, helping to shut down that run. So I'm going Jordan Phillips. All right. The breakout star, Jeff.
I mean, I got to stick with Nolan Ray. I've been, banging that drum for about a year now. Everything I've heard is he looks like a star. Obviously we've seen other running backs touted as stars. It didn't necessarily happen for them, but I think it's going to be Nolan Ray.
Perry Fisher for me. He's got the size. He's got incredible instinct. He's got ball skills. I think he's going to end up being a real number 1 corner who's going to go play in the NFL for a long time.
And Paul, your offensive MVP is who I was going to pick for the breakout star, Preston Howard. Mm-hmm. He's not unknown, but he's not a star for sure. And
came in as a quarterback, right?
Right. So he was my guy for breakout star. I think he's going to have, he's going to take over for Corey Dyches, no problem, and be a real weapon at the tight end. Okay. True freshman who impresses.
Who's going to
get on the field? Because this year, it's not like most years at Maryland where you're kind of searching for some new guys to plug a lot of holes. There's so many veterans, especially on defense. True freshman. I mean, like I said, Judah Jenkins, it's probably one of those 3 cornerbacks. I'm just going to pick all 3 of them. Judah Jenkins, Braden Lee, and Kevin Humes. I'm just going to cop out and pick all 3 of them. One of those guys, because they like all of them. And they're going to, all right, I'll go with Humes. I'll take Humes. That's too big of a fence sitting right there. So we'll go with Humes. They really like him. He was a 4-star kind of kid. He was the highest rated uncommitted cornerback when they signed him last year. So.
All right.
Yeah, I think I think really the only answer has to be one of the cornerbacks. Is there going to be ones that are going to get on the field? I would go with Jenkins. I think the good counsel kid's going to be legit, and like Jeff said, that's the one who's been getting all those kind of camp whispers the past couple weeks. That he's,
I forgot. I forgot one breakout guy, Daniel Wingate, linebacker. He's about 6'4", 240. Everybody's raving about him.
Yep, that's another one.
Yeah, and nobody really knows about him. He if I would be tempted to switch my pick. I think people should keep a close eye on him.
And I'm right there with you guys, except I was going to say Braden Lee because I've heard he had some big hype as well. So
there we
go.
Go.
Either one of them.
Any of those 3 quarterbacks would work.
You're right, because they're the ones you're going to see the field. Okay. The Maryland's regular season record in 2024. Jeff.
I probably got to go 7-5, which is is right around where the where the odds makers have them. If it wasn't for the QB and offensive line questions, I'd be all in on them this year, 9 wins, and that still could certainly happen, but you don't have the evidence necessarily to back it up yet. So I think they probably could. I think with the bowl game, they probably land on 8 wins again, unless, both of those positions, unless Billy Edwards, whoever it is above average at quarterback and the offensive line holds up, and then it could be better.
Yeah, this is going to be boring. I was going to say the same, 7-5. I think obviously the concerns about offensive line and quarterback are real, but I also believe that there is something to program inertia, and it does feel like this program has gotten to the point where like the floor has been raised. Plus, you have a relatively easy schedule this year. It wouldn't surprise me if they actually went and got 8, given how good the defense is. If a couple things go right on offense, and the schedule being as weak as it's going to be in the new Big Ten, but you can't predict that with the questions they've got on the line. You just got to see what happens. But 7-5 probably makes the most sense. 6-6, I could be talking to as well.
Yeah, Jeff, you posted a thread on the board, prediction contest, and I entered it. Ineligible for the prize, but I said 6-6. I've come up from them too. I'm right with you guys at 7-5 again. I think the recent reports about how the offensive line is looking better, and maybe I'm just buying into the hype a little bit, but I'm back up to 7-5 as well.
And Paul's right though. I could definitely see it being a magical season with more wins than that, because it's got what he mentioned about the inertia. It had for the first time in since the Ralph years. You just have dozens of veteran bought in
players,
dudes. Yeah. The culture is not what it was 5 years ago. It's demanding. Expectations are much higher. They're mature. So it feels like, everything else is coming together other than those 2 big question marks we mentioned. And that can go in college football, having that kind of, experience and size. And, you look at the team this year from what everybody who looks at them says, wow, that looks like a Big Ten team. Like Loxley's gradually built them up physically and athletically to a different level where they're not going to get pushed around. So, to Paul's point, I could definitely see it being one of those. It has potential to be one of those magical years just because you have so many guys who've been around and want to win.
Yeah, tell me how they do against, basically the entire season to me is like, okay, well, can you go beat Indiana on the road? They're not good. Right? Can you go get that win? Can you beat Minnesota on the road? Can you beat Iowa at home? Iowa's just a team that just grinds us down most of the time. They're not very good this year either, I don't think, but that's just a team we normally don't beat. So, September, they could come out of September legit 5-0 or 4-1, but instead of just looking at Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, you've still got Northwestern at home. You've got USC coming all the way across the country to play here. You've got at Minnesota, which is winnable. You've got Rutgers at home, Iowa at home, and at Penn State, which isn't great, but Penn State doesn't look like a total world beater this year. So really at Oregon, I think is the only absolute no chance they're winning that game with, a hat tip to at Penn State. Whereas normally it feels like you're looking at a schedule and seeing 3 absolute no chance wins most of the time. So the schedule really helps this year if they can figure things out in September and basically beat the teams they need to. Then you can start to dream a little bit because you've got some beatable teams in October, November in a way they normally don't.
Yeah, concur with all of that stuff. Same. How great would it be if they get through those first 6-0, and then they've got USC coming in undefeated. They'll be ranked at that point.
Well, that's your game day right there.
A chance, yeah, they would have a chance.
If they're 6-0 and USC is pretty good,
they'd have a shot at it for sure.
That probably brings it in, but
be.
I'm way beyond predicting that type of thing.
But let's not forget that ESPN would rather side with one of their programs over one of Fox's programs. So there's that too. So
that's a good point. That's being a Big Ten conference game, it probably rules it out completely. But
yeah,
thanks, Larry.
Yeah, it's true though. All right, final score on Saturday.
It should be a beatdown. I mean, if they don't win by, what's the spread? 22, 23, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah.
If they don't win by 25 or 30, I just can't see that. I mean, UConn's actually gotten better. Jim Mora is like a massive upgrade over Randy Edsall, so they've made some strides. So it won't be what it would have been a few years ago when UConn was just losing every game by like 40 points. But I think Maryland, I think defense probably shuts them down. Maryland wins 42-10, something like that.
Paul?
Yeah, I see like a 35-13 kind of thing, like comfortable but not a total blowout. Like they're gonna have to work through some things.
And Locks really wants the fans on board. So on one hand, maybe you don't want to show too much to the next team, but on the other, maybe you want some fireworks just to kind of keep getting that buzz going because he's really been focused on that.
Right in the same ballpark with you guys. I'll say 41-17, something similar to that. Like just like you guys, just depends on a touchdown difference in the scoring there between the three of us or so on either side. All right, guys, that has been our 2024 football season kickoff. We are 3 days away. What time? Well, Paul, what time are you getting there on Saturday?
To the crack of 10 a.m. I don't know.
10 a.m.
Dude, I'm not a hero anymore, man. I can't get there at 6 a.m. like I used to and wait at the gates. So I'm not going to fool myself.
More importantly, the week after, Larry, give the people some early advanced
2 weeks after.
2 weeks after that.
2 weeks after. 2 weeks after.
Yes, sorry. 2 weeks after that, we will be heading down en masse to Charlottesville to do a live on location show at the Lightwell Survey Winery, which is about 20 to 25 minutes west of Charlottesville when Maryland plays at UVA. We're going to be doing our show on the Friday night before that. The Friday night is September 13th. We'll be doing that from 6 to 8. We have one confirmed guest right now. That's Steve Suter. We have a few others percolating, and we're trying to confirm them. We can't announce it yet. And then the game is obviously on Saturday. So we'll be going to the official tailgate. We'll be going to the game to hang out with all you guys on that day as well. So please come down early. Join us on that Friday. It's going to be a really fun time. The winery is owned by one of the 24/7 Maryland at 247sports.com message board members, Jay-Z. So he's a Terp.
So Jay-Z too.
So Jay is one of the original Phrygians Legions from way back in the day. We met back in like 2003 when we started doing all that stuff. They had done it the year before, and he is an original. And he's him and his brother were two of the owners of the place. It's a great shop. Wine's great. Really cool space. There's going to be some kind of snack food stuff going on there. There's going to be what's the brewery that's coming there, Larry? Do you remember?
I can't remember right
so
now.
It's not just wine. You don't like wine, that's fine. There's going to be good beer there as well.
We'll tell them next week.
Yeah, there's some people on the Inside MarylandSports.com message board that were talking about trying to get a bus to take people from Charlottesville to the winery and then back afterwards. I'm not sure how far that plan has gone, but there are going to be some transportation, some stuff going on there. If you're interested in that, you can check on the message boards or tweet at us or what have you. But it's going to be a great time. We'll go, we'll get it done. We'll be at the Terps Club Alumni Association tailgate the next day, as well as the stadium. So, come on down, man. It's only a 2-hour drive for a lot of people.
The event is from 5 to 8. We are going to have our show from 6 to 8. Yeah. And the brewery that's associated is called Basic City.
There you go.
Basic City Brewery is also associated. So
and there will be some of that Terrapin branded beer, I think.
Yeah, all the food is
coming as well. Yep.
Maryland themed, so it's like crab cakes and whatever else. It's all on the message board. There's a whole thread about it on there. And if any of you have any questions, you can message any of us on the board as well. We have had a very long show. It's our first of the year, so
deal with it. You've been without us for like 3 months.
Yeah, kicking off the season. So thank you guys very much for joining us. And hopefully, if you see you guys Saturday, come up and say hi to us. If not, we'll see you guys next Wednesday. We're back on a regular schedule. This is IMS Radio.